evening. Welcome to the Big Story. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Riza Diaz.
Tonight's big stories. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin let slip that there's a little-known unit in Palawan manned by American service members. Task Force Ayungin is what it's called. What exactly is it, and what is it doing in Palawan?
House Speaker Martin Romualdez tells Vice President Sara Duterte, if you really feel sorry for your staff getting grilled at the hearings, show up and explain the confidential expenses yourself.
And what's touted as the world's largest integrated solar and battery project will soon rise in Nueva Ecija. The Meralco Terra project promises to deliver as much as 3,500 megawatts to Luzon or the Luzon grid by 2027.
Just before he left the Philippines, outgoing U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin let slip something that there's a military task force with American service members operating out of Palawan.
But the public didn't know about it until now. Task Force Ayungin, as its name suggests, will zero in on guarding the shoal where the BRP Sierra Madre is grounded.
Now the question is this the first sign of the Philippines accepting American help in the resupply missions? Kyla Macantan has tonight's big story.
The secret's out, if it was meant to be a secret in the first place. While on a visit to the AFP Western Command headquarters in Palawan just this Tuesday, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin confirmed the existence of what looks like a military unit of American troops. The announcement, or more of a slip as some observers see it, was made via a post on X, where Austin mentioned the term U.S. Task Force Ayungin for the first time, while thanking American service members deployed to it. Obviously, the task force focuses on Ayungin Shoal, otherwise known as Second Thomas Shoal, which is well within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, being just over 100 nautical miles from Palawan, where Westcom is. Ayungin is also where the BRP Sierra Madre was grounded in 1999 to serve as a permanent outpost. How did the task force come about? National Security Advisor Eduardo Año is not saying, but clarified that a special group will only provide technical support to operations in the West Philippine Sea. He stressed that Americans will not have direct participation in rotations and resupply mission.
It is purely, solely a Philippine armed forces, Philippine forces operation. The Westcom supported by the Philippine Coast Guard.
The U.S. Embassy in the Philippines said Task Force Ayungin enhances the U.S.-Philippine alliance coordination and interoperability by enabling U.S. forces to support AFP activities in the South China Sea. The AFP also insisted help from the U.S. only comes in the form of technical assistance through information sharing and will only be within Westcom in Palawan. This information, AFP added, when they plan and implement programs and activities meant to protect WPS. What both Filipino and American officials are not saying at the moment is if the Ayungin Task Force signals a direct commitment from the United States. Recall that America has repeatedly offered to assist in supply runs in the shoal or do patrols with the Philippines in disputed waters. Manila has declined each time, saying its armed forces and Coast Guard can still manage. Mobile journalist Kyla Macantan, we are One News.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's try to make sense of this. We have with us tonight a resident geopolitical analyst, Richard Haydarian. I'm sorry, I forgot the other descriptors. Blogger extraordinaire, lecturer
TikTok
at
dancer,
Asian Center of UP.
Wonderful guy, amazing, beautiful.
Now TikTok,
self-proclaimed
now
blogger. Yeah.
TikTok dancer.
Task Force Ayungin is what we're here to talk about tonight.
Right.
There's a lot of questions around this at the moment, a lot of confusion. Precisely because we're only finding out about this now. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in a tweet, and nobody knows at this point whether that was intentional or not. Let slip, and that's why we use that verb, let slip, that there is such a thing as Task Force Ayungin. I know they've explained it away by saying it's just technical assistance via information sharing, but wasn't that already happening before? And why do you need a task force for that? What do you make of it?
With just a few months before a second Donald Trump presidency and a very interesting cabinet coming together, which we can discuss separately. Everyone's talking about Trump-proofing, but this is, I think, more 6 months ago. What we're seeing right now is what I call pre-Trumping. right?
Okay.
You're kind of trying to out-Trump Trump, right? So we already see that in Ukraine, where the United States, you know, in the 11th hour is clearing Ukraine to use NATO, including American missile systems against Russia, right? We already saw the update just a while ago about even allowing the Ukrainians to use anti-personnel mines. Right? So you're seeing here that the Biden administration, because they have nothing to lose anymore, is to go all in on different conflicts. Now that brings us to the second Thomas Sholayong issue. Now, obviously, the United States has made it clear that the Mutual Defense Treaty applies to any of our public vessels, aircrafts, and yung mga sundalo natin.
Right.
So our military personnel. And that's what makes Ayungin Shoal extremely important because we literally have a military base there atop BRP Sierra Madre. So it would be impossible to think the Americans would not be involved in the situation there, especially after the escalation we saw earlier this year and some of our folks even losing their finger and almost getting injured. So this is a confirmation of, I think, what has been there for quite some time. The only question here is the Biden administration laying down the ground for more direct American involvement?
That's right.
Or they're just trying to preempt that and say, hey, if ever, before Trump takes credit for anything big or important there, we have already been laying this down. So I think it's more about, I call it pre-Trumping, right, maneuver. But we're totally not surprised. Now, just to be clear, it is different for the U.S. to have like shadowing vessels or drones while we're doing patrols than something which is more like intelligence sharing and coordination and what you
That's
can call
right.
offshore. Like, we're just here, just in case you ask to need us to come, we'll come. That's different from, oh, let's go there together.
Correct.
So I think there are levels of coordination. We're not level like 5 or 6 yet. We're still at level 1 or 2. But eventually we may go there.
That's what I was trying to ask. Like, do you think one of these days that could very much happen, that they could also be joining us in the resupply missions? We've denied their help. They've been offering help, but the Philippines says we can still manage.
We could still manage back in the day, and probably in theory we can still manage, but the reality is that the preponderance of force of China is a reality we have to deal with. And I think everyone is expecting under the second Donald Trump presidency, there'll be many colorful things we can talk about forever. But on the foreign policy front, if you look at Mike Waltz, you look at Marco Rubio, Senator Rubio has been a very good friend of the Philippines. He had an op-ed piece last year saying there's no way the U.S. can maintain its great power status if it loses key allies like the Philippines and access to important resources here. So I think everyone is expecting that there'll be more all-in. I don't know about Trump himself, but his team in terms of helping
hawkish on
frontline
China.
allies like the Philippines. And China will be important. Just the other day, for the first time in a long time, America no longer has any aircraft carrier in the Middle East. They're taking them out and they're putting everything here. So we're now very much at the front line. So yes, if China responds to that growing American presence focus with also growing muscle flexing, we might go to the next level. So I think when people look at the West Philippine Sea, they think this is it, this is the fight. But this is a 12-round, I always say, boxing match, and we're still in the early rounds here. And things can take many permutations, including how much Americans will be involved, right? So I think we're still in the preliminary phases. And for me, after 6 years of Duterte, after decades of not building our capabilities and focusing internally, we're now in this very learning curve mode, right? And in this learning curve, sometimes we feel we should do it more, sometimes we can get more help. But in principle, I like the fact that we're still front and center taking care of the situation because we don't want to look like America's pawns. Because the problem with that is that it just allows China to tell the rest of ASEAN or the region, don't help the Filipinos.
That's
They're
right.
just American pawns.
That's right.
So the visuals matters, but operationally, I'm sure there's certain details we are not privy to that may suggest that indeed the Americans may be more directly involved. If not, down the road, that could be the situation.
What have you heard about this intelligence sharing command center?
Gisomia.
Well,
Inside Camp Aguinaldo, what exactly are they sharing?
Well, the
What
Japanese and
information?
Koreans have something similar to the Gisomnia, which is essentially it allows for us to have very sensitive, high-level cybersecurity cooperation, intelligence sharing. But what I found interesting with the announcement from the DND a while ago is that it would also be a basis to facilitate more advanced acquisitions from America. As you know, one of the things we didn't discuss today is the Typhoon missile system.
That's right.
6 months ago, we were even denying it was here. Then 5 months
And
ago,
now
we're
there's
saying it will not be here.
And now we're talking about
3 months
potentially
ago, we
buying
said we
it.
want it here. Now we're saying we want to buy it.
And now, well, there's
That's
other
like
questions
Donald
around
Trump
that.
level
Exactly.
of whirlwind. So with all of these big developments, including, so you're talking about will we escalate in the, I'm saying we might escalate on all levels, including on the Taiwan question. You were in Mavulis. You know, we have bases very close there. Imagine if we put missile systems very close to Taiwan, right? Those kinds, that will,
That's
you know,
gonna
that-
escalate things.
That's
So,
going to
so
poke the
talking
Chinese.
about the escalating it
Yeah.
and invoking possibly the Mutual Defense Treaty, I've always been wondering, because for us to get some real help on the ground, it has to go through Congress, the U.S. Congress, right? How about in the Philippines? If we get caught in the Taiwan problem, the conflict there, what would it require? What process would it require for us before we go to conflict or be involved in conflict?
Well, first of all, it's mutual defense, not mutual offense treaty, right? So I think sometimes we think, when you say mutual defense treaty activation, this is it, let's go war. No, actually, there's step by steps. If you read actually the text.
Kasi armed attack din. You have to qualify what an armed attack
but
is.
if you look at it in the MDT text itself, not forget about the guidelines and all, it's very clear that first of all, mag-uusap tayo. Opo yung mga generals natin, general
That's
nila,
right.
mag-consultation tayo. Now, inevitably, the Congress, others have to come in. But we know in the case of U.S., for instance, on issues of foreign policy, there's tremendous amount of deference to the president, especially if it's Trump and everyone is Republican with trifecta and everything that we predicted correctly the other week, right? So I think there will be significant leeway. And let's not forget, there's bipartisan consensus against China, which is good for us, if God forbid we reach there. But as I said, MDT doesn't mean all-out war agad. It just means you activate a
start the
set of
discussions.
procedures
Yeah.
that may end in a military response or not. And then, by the way, kasama din dyan, we can take it to the United Nations Security Council, right? So, so it's not the nuclear option, fine. It's just the beginning of the final resource sets of steps, right? So, for me, when you say invoking mutual defense treaty doesn't mean let's go to war, per se. There are many steps before that. Nevertheless, on the Taiwan question, I know I'm more or less isolated on this issue, but I love Taiwan and all of that fantastic food, great people, amazing people. I stayed there as a visiting scholar back in the day. Taiwan fellow, lots of it.
It's
But my
vital
point
in the
is,
semiconductor supply
hinay-hinay
chain.
lang tayo. One of the things that I'm worried under the Trump administration, I'm talking about the administration, not Trump himself. No one really knows what Trump will do himself. But in the administration is that it might make it more difficult for Philippines to hedge its bets. We literally had Elbridge Colby, one of the top guys in the Republican Party here, who said something like, half measures are dangerous. Meaning, hindi pwede pahapyaw-hapyaw. Medyo China ka, medyo US.
Right.
Sabi niya, you have to make decision na. So, baka kasama dyan is, medyo ma-pressure tayo na, Pilipinas, katabi niyo yung Taiwan, alay niyo kami, hindi pwede kanya-kanyang diskarte dito. So I really hope the BBM administration gets the most out from US on West Philippine Sea, but make sure we don't get over-involved on the Taiwan issue. The burden should be more on Japan and US who are more capable. Because we're so behind the curve, we're still catching up. Imagine kung ma-stretch tayo on Taiwan, West Philippine Sea, ang dami pa natin bagyo sa Catanduanes, like...
And now we want to buy typhoon
exactly.
missiles.
So
that
don't
might be used as a
overcompensate.
leverage
Yun nga,
against us to get something
exactly.
from us.
And don't give China excuse or others. And at the end of the day, if God forbid something crazy happens, we have 250,000 Filipinos to evacuate there. And China may have a say if you can safely get those people across. Now, I'm not saying let's appease China. I'm not saying let's throw Taiwan under the bus. I'm just saying don't overpromise when you still have to get your house in order. We are still dealing with the Ayungin issue and you want to be 100. So what I'm saying, when it comes to Taiwan, maybe just mathematically, 60% US, 30% Japan, 5% Australia, maybe Philippines 2% of the burden sharing, right? Practically because our bases are close to there, right? So what I'm saying, go for minimal involvement on Taiwan, but still helpful. Go for maximal assistance on the West Philippine Sea.
Here's
Play
hoping
that
they
game.
see the math that
Right.
way too.
But
Right. Or they
unfortunately,
hear that
I'm not
out.
going to be the negotiator with Donald Trump.
And we do know Trump is transactional.
Yeah.
Quite transactional.
But
Sorry.
not granular, so I don't know. I don't know.
He's gonna
will
leave
figure
it
out.
to his team.
Yeah.
Union, let's come back to a union. Obviously, we've had a string of officials try to respond to what Secretary Austin tweeted.
Right.
The U.S. Embassy here said, this task force, and I believe we have that graphic, enhances U.S.-Philippine alliance coordination and interoperability by enabling U.S. forces to support armed forces of the Philippines' activities in the South China Sea. And then it goes on to say, this initiative aligns with multiple lines of cooperation. If we could just roll, there you go. Multiple lines of cooperation between U.S. and Philippine forces, including the Mutual Defense Board Security Engagement Board process and the Bantay Dagat framework, in addition to our long-standing shared efforts to address regional challenges, foster stability, and promote a free and open Indo-Pacific. It's a lot of
Beautiful,
high-level diplomatic speak.
Right.
Translate it for
We
us.
simplify.
What does that mean?
In short, this is just a natural flow of where this alliance is going, right? I would love to see Donald Trump giving a shorthand version of
But
that.
the word interoperability there stood out to me.
That
Again,
means if there's a
does that mean
contingency,
practical
we are
terms
well
now?
coordinated. We can work together. Lock
Because
this.
for a long time we were just talking about information sharing between the two militaries, and as Riza pointed out, the armed forces here has repeatedly begged off tangible American help, and now we're saying interoperability is what this task force is doing. Again, is that a sign?
I think we're reading too much into it. I think, we were supposed to do a lot of things with our alliances long time ago, and we didn't. Because, we're the only country to kick out the Americans. The Japanese and Koreans kept the Americans. The Australians even had them even more in Darwin. The Singaporeans welcome. We're the only ones who kicked the Americans out. So there was this huge period from 1990s to 2000s whereby we really didn't work on these issues, maritime security. So it's either global war on terror and counterterrorism or still getting back to where we started. Now I think finally the foundations of the alliance are congealing and crystallizing. And if there's one good news is that we see a continuity from Trump 1 to Biden and potentially to Trump 2.0. So I think this is the continuity we can rely on and we have to push for. And the fact that you have people like Marco Rubio, who are good friends of the Philippines. Maybe you want to ask Senator Trillanes, It's like he met him a lot of time back in the day, So there are a lot of points whereby I think we can be hopeful about a sort of continuity.
As far as the defense.
Yeah. Now, in spite of having colorful people like, and I've, President Marcos Jr. is, I think, the perfect person to deal with President Trump. They're just going to talk about Ma'am Imelda Marcos and their
the
great
Trump
days
Tower.
in Manhattan. Oh, well, they deny that. Their great days in Manhattan.
Their Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah, so I think they can just keep it there and let the professionals handle the operational side. At the end of the day, let me just say this. I'm still cautiously optimistic about everything that is happening because finally we're figuring out what we want, what we can do, and where we want to go. And the reality is that we didn't have that before. Ang gulo natin.
Right.
Diba? Kay Aquino dito, kay Duterte dito, kay
It's always been
Arroyo.
like gray.
Now it's one direction.
Medyo klaro na. So, and we have to make it clear to the rest of ASEAN, this is not a BBM thing. This is a Philippine national interest. This is our consensus nowadays, with a few fringes here and there outside it. But 90% of Filipinos support where we're going, if you look at the surveys and what they say. So, I think we're on the right path. We just have to make sure na steady lang yung direction of the wind and that we adjust accordingly and we play those granular game that I don't think Trump will appreciate.
6 days ago, it was reported that the Ayungin resupply mission went without incident. Where do you think China is now? What? I mean, it was quite surprising that
No, diba? After the
was very peaceful.
June-July incident, we had a number of safe. Because remember, di ba meron tayong parang notification mechanism?
Right.
Na
That
medyo
we
may
give advice
mystification.
now.
Yeah. Sabi ng China, they're getting our permission. Sabi ng Philippines, no. We're just notifying.
Yes.
Hey,
We
ito
advise
kami ha,
them.
pero wala kayong pake. Di ba? Parang ganun. So actually, that worked eh. Kaya ang ginagawa ng China, sa ibang area na tayo pinipressure, like Sabina Shoal, like Scarborough Shoal. So I think China is realizing that medyo mainit masyado eh, yung Ayungin Shoal. And US is
Hindi
there.
may task force Sabina.
Maybe they really don't know.
In the next coming days, you
Sabina,
don't
we
know.
don't have a military presence there.
Yeah.
Kung sana we did that in Scarborough. Ngayon mo makita yung hindi natin nagawa. If in the 1990s, we did the same thing in Second Thomas Shoal, di sana nag-ground din tayo ng isa pang old ship, naglagay tayo ng tao sa
Now
Scarborough
it's too
Shoal.
late.
Walang takas ng US kasi they're obliged to help us. So this means talaga, you have to take the strategic initiative. So the Ayungin Shoal, kudos to President Erap. If there's one thing he got right on foreign policy is to ground that rusted ship because now at least we have something to defend.
By
So
the way,
kudos to Erap.
the decrease in presence in Chinese ships also due to bad weather. I spoke to Commodore J.
Right,
Tanyeli about
right.
it. Don't forget, there has
The
been
mini
a string,
typhoons.
Oh,
string
it is
of
December.
cyclones. That's
November,
right.
December.
He pointed to bad weather as well.
And
as,
maybe in 30 years with climate change, our problems will be solved. Everything will be under the water.
But now
That's
that
very
there's no more
possible.
typhoons, the number of Chinese vessels could
Maybe
increase
that solves
again.
all our problems.
But
yeah.
also,
That would work to our favor.
the GSOMIA has clearly angered Beijing. They have said as much. They've even threatened to pursue, what was the term? Necessary measures to
Yeah.
retaliate. What do we make of that? Isn't that just serving to poke the bear once
Well,
again?
there's always going to be diplomatic rants, and all that means is something important. But remember, the other thing we said is this will be also our model with other like-minded powers and countries. So South Korea, Japan, Australia, France, Germany, England. So this is the beginning of a new chapter. So China is realizing this is no longer a 1-2 punch with the Philippines. It's the Philippines networking right and left. So we have a very hyper drive mode of diplomacy, defense diplomacy, which is not just U.S. I mean, Kudus, one thing I think we are getting right nowadays is that it's not all about the United States anymore. The U.S. element is very important, 40% of the picture, but 60% of the picture is everyone else who's getting active on this. You know, I've been going around from Germany to New Zealand to Tokyo. I'll be in India soon. You know, so everyone is interested to build relationship with us because they see us as a kind of a pivot state in this part. Not frontline, that's Taiwan, unfortunately, but we're a pivot state. So just keep on building on that. And I hope even when Trump comes in, we emphasize we're a key ally, but we also have our own mind, our own strategic autonomy to protect.
What do you see on the economic front? We do know, like today it was reported that it's 59 peso to a dollar. The dollar is very strong. As an initial reaction to the to President-elect Trump. But some analysts say that the honeymoon phase might be over once Trump gets in position and puts all of the tariffs on Chinese goods. I mean, what do you see happening on that front? Is it going to be an economic war? How are we going to be affected?
Yeah, the people we have to watch are people like Lighthizer, the former trade representative of Reagan and Trump 1.0. They have been saying things that should really make you worried, that this could be 60% on them and 20% in Japan and everyone else, and that the reality is that there will be no free trade agreement, whatever, with U.S. most likely under Trump, right? The Indo-Pacific Economic Framework that Biden negotiated out. He also nixed the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. So if you're expecting some new big free trade deal, you have to worry. If you're Vietnam and some of the countries have huge trade surplus, you have to worry, right? I think it's only Singapore in this region who doesn't have huge, in fact, they even have deficit with the U.S. So all of us should be worried to a certain degree, but I think Philippines is at the lower ladder in terms of, lower rung of the ladder in terms of trade. So my suggestion, and I hope folks will at least listen to me on this issue, is then push for strategic investment from a national security standpoint. We have the second largest nickel reserves in the world. It's one of the few nickel reserves in the world that is not dominated by Chinese companies. You go to Indonesia, you go to Chile, you go to Sub-Saharan Africa, from nickel and cobalt, everything are Chinese company. Electric cars, everything is Chinese companies. So we should offer ourselves as a safe haven, China-free investment destination, and hopefully, if we're going to get involved in Taiwan, also get more investments on semiconductors. I come from Baguio. We do Texas Instrument forever. We can do more sophisticated packaging design, in fact, production of semiconductors. So yun ang pwede natin gawin in the name of national security.
Rich, sorry to interrupt you there because the news headline just dropped whilst you were talking. The ICC has issued an arrest warrant against Prime Minister. No, relax.
Okay.
Prime Minister, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which we were talking about last time you were here. We were saying that they couldn't even, that case has been months in the burner. They couldn't even issue a arrest warrant, but here we are. It's finally here. I don't know what the implications are.
Well, there was an announcement earlier that they rejected questioning of the jurisdiction of ICC by Israel. So I think so I'm not surprised. That's why you saw my face. I was not so I even know where is this going. But I really don't know. I mean, I hazarded to say something on ICC earlier. I don't want to get burned again. But what I can say is it can go either way because Israel is an important, influential country. U.S. will stand by them. Maybe Trump will even threaten sanctions. Karim Khan, the prosecutor, is facing certain allegations. So one school of thought, I think Justice Carpi, among others, have said that we might see some delays in the ICC because they have a lot of other things to handle. But I think people like Senator Trillanes are confident that, including in this case, we see that the machine keeps on grinding on. So actually, if you're Duterte's, if they're willing to go against a sitting head of state, a very powerful country with the backing of U.S., who are you? I mean, no offense in comparison to them. So to think ICC will be scared of you because you make some rants in some congressional area,
the implications
so invite me for a...
That's another conversation. That's another
I'm controlling myself.
That's right. That's right. Okay, we'll see where this takes. And by the way, Karim Khan is also the same prosecutor investigating the Duterte drug war. So we'll see where that goes. Exactly. Thank you so much for your time. Resident geopolitical analyst, Richard Haydarian.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Well, Chinese spies have entered the Philippines through POGOs. That's according to Senator Risa Hontiveros. She says she will disclose the information when her Women and Children Committee holds its final POGO hearing next week, November 26. Hontiveros also says some POGOs are now being advised by Philippine government officials to pose as legitimate businesses like BPOs and restaurants so as to evade detection.
May bagong impormasyon po tayong nakalap, lalo na sa pagkakaroon ng mga espiya ng China dito sa Pilipinas sa pamamagitan ng mga POGO. May mga government officials pa na nagpapayo sa kanila ng mga ganun. Bago na lang kayo ng forma, at least legally, bilang mga simpleng BPOs lamang. Pero nakatago sa loob nun ay mga POGO operations pa. Na sila mismo nagpapayo sa mga POGO operators na lumusot sa ganoong paraan. Pero pinablicize ko na kaagad para mag-serve ng warning kung totoo yan at alam nila kung sino sila, tigilin nila yan.
Hontiveros says they will aim to tie up loose ends next week, including reforms needed to close the gaps in President Marcos' executive order banning POGOs. Expected to attend that inquiry are alleged POGO players Alice Guo or Gua Ho Ping, Cassandra Lee Ong, and Tony Yang.
Up next, House Speaker Martin Romualdez calls on Vice President Sara Duterte to face the music and attend the hearings on her use of confidential funds. We'll be speaking with Congressman Jonathan Keith Flores about this when the big story returns. Keep it here.
You're watching the big story here on One News. A hypocrite and pa-victim. That's what House lawmakers had to say about Vice President Sara Duterte after she expressed concerns about her staff getting dragged into the issue over her office's confidential expenses. Marian Enriquez has the story.
House Speaker Martin Romualdez is urging Vice President Sara Duterte to show up to the House hearings herself if she truly felt bad about her staff having to answer questions on confidential funds.
Dapat na siya sumipot at mag-oath at magsalita at mag-explika kasi siya lang yata may alam kung ano nangyari sa mga pondo kaya dapat siya na mag-explika. Huwag na lang yang bigay sa mga officials ng OVP o sa DepEd.
At yesterday's marathon hearing by the House Committee on Good Government, Duterte's Chief of Staff Zuleika Lopez was cited in contempt for undue interference. Turns out the OVP had written to the Commission on Audit back in August, asking it not to comply with a subpoena from the lower house for audit records. That letter was signed by Lopez. Lopez also confirmed VP Sara had known about the letter. Prior to this, 4 other officers of the OVP were also cited in contempt for their repeated failure to attend the hearing, including her special disbursing officers Gina Acosta and Edward Fajardo, who are at the moment nowhere to be found. At a press conference yesterday while the hearing was going on, Duterte said she felt sorry for her staff who were getting dragged into the political persecution of her.
Ang ako ang mga kauban sa Office of the Vice President kay kung makita ninyo luwigid kayo sila sa pag-persecute sa ako sa pagbukod sa ako sa pagdaot sa ako ang pangalan, naapil ang ilangan trabaho, naapil ang ilangan pangalan.
The House leaders did not take this sitting down with Congresswoman Franz Castro, calling her a hypocrite.
So, kasalanan niya yan. Huwag niya kaming sisihin dahil ginusto niya yan na ang mga staff niya yung isa lang. Siya nga yung pinapasalang namin, ayaw niya mag-take oath. So, huwag siyang hipokrita.
In a statement, House Majority Leader Manix Dalipa says, "Wag kang pa-victim. Tama na ang pambubudol." He also said that the Vice President should stop using her staff as human shields. It's about time she face Congress, answer the questions, and stop blaming others for her failures and fear of accountability. For his part, Congressman Rog Gutierrez blasted how VP Sara continuously pertains to the investigations as persecution.
Hindi po siya fair statement na persecution po kasi we're only doing our jobs in the aid of legislation. Sana mag-participate na lang po. If they were to attend and to participate, I don't think it wouldn't drag so long na po as has happened.
Hearing resumes on Monday, November 25, and according to the committee, this might be the last if all 4 OVP officials cited in contempt show up and explain once and for all where hundreds of millions in confidential funds went. For News 5, I'm Marian Enriquez. We are One News.
Let's discuss this and more with Congressman Jonathan Keith Flores, who is also in the House Good Government Committee hearings. Magandang gabi, Congressman.
Good evening po, ladies. Hello.
Okay, Congressman, the Vice President has said back in October that she will be there, sasamahan daw niya sa detention ng kanyang mga ka-office staff if they get pinned down. But what are you seeing now and what are you finding? And have you tried to contact the Vice President to appear in the next hearing?
Well, what's important is that the 4 persons who are working under office should appear, because there seems to be a concerted effort to hide them. First, you have a travel authority that does not specifically indicate where they're going, and you have other officers who say that they do not know specifically the locations of the staff. So it's obvious that there's a concerted effort to hide these 4 individuals.
Yesterday we were listening to the marathon hearing, and there was a long stretch when the officers, the ones who turned up, for instance, Attorney Zuleika Lopez, were being grilled over their knowledge of how the confidential funds were being spent. But what struck me was that none of you guys seemed to have bought her alibi that she didn't know, or I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't call it alibi, bought her explanation that she does not know how the confidential funds were spent. Tell us why.
But when I asked the questions, kasi I tried to lay the basis. I asked them if Attorney Lopez was running a tight ship, and if everyone knew, or if she knew what was going on in the office. And everyone answered in the affirmative. Before I went to the questions on whether she knew anything about the confidential funds, she answered that it's compartmentalized and that on this aspect, she has nothing to do with it. So it's passing on the buck to the SDOs and the Assistant Chief of Staff, which is why you could sense the frustration also of the members of the committee that they needed to ask these questions to these 4 persons who have been missing so far.
The excuse that the OVP is compartmentalized and that she only gets to do the tasks that were assigned to her, that's hard to believe.
Oh, yes, it is, because she's the chief of staff, and she has the, if you could say, the highest trust and confidence of the head of office. And confidential funds naturally should be handled by the person who has the highest trust and confidence of the head of office.
One thing that's being questioned now is how were they able to disburse confidential funds in 20 places in one day? Talk to us about that.
Yes, when we asked COA about how confidential funds are used, they answered that the special disbursing officer should be the person who actually disburses these funds. So if there's only one special disbursing officer for the office of the Vice President, how could he have physically disbursed these funds in 26 different places in the entire Philippines? That's where the questions of some of the members of the committee were. Now, it's physically impossible to be in all 26 places in one day.
Hindi ba po pwedeng digital yun? Kailangan physical talaga.
Sent to all.
Well,
sent to
if it was deposited, then how could they have signed the acknowledgement receipts?
Congressman, what we get from Vice President Sara every time she's asked is she has no knowledge, so and so. What would it take, you think, to have her say a little more, or just keep on saying she doesn't know anything about it?
Well, I mean, it's fine with me if she really doesn't know anything about it. Just present the persons who know something about it.
Roselyn Sanchez, the OVP Director for Admin and Financial Services, has named 3 people who have knowledge over the confidential funds, one of which is the Chief of Staff, Zuleika Lopez, also Gina Acosta, and the Vice President herself. Did she say the same thing in the hearing? Meron na ba siyang sinabi na kung sino ba talaga ang nakakaalam?
Attorney Lopez, on the other hand, says that it's only the Assistant Chief of Staff, Ortonio, and Gina Acosta, the Special Disbursement Officer, who has knowledge. And I asked Attorney Lopez kung saan nagre-report itong mga Assistant Chief of Staff niya. And she said that they don't report to her about the confidential funds, so they must be reporting to the Vice President. So if we take that together, then there should only be 3 persons who know about the disbursements of the confidential funds. That's Gina Costa, the Special Disbursement Officer, that Assistant Chief of Staff Ortonio, and the Vice President herself.
At the same time, though, the crux of the problem is the questionable acknowledgement receipts, right? Before you guys dug up see Mary Grace Piatos, which we can't say with a straight face to this day. And then now there's Cocoy Villamin with the signatures that are, the signatures say the same name, but the strokes were very different.
Obviously different.
Right. And these are across 4,000, is that right? 4,000 acknowledgement receipts that you guys poured through?
I don't know the exact number, but there were a lot. And another thing that you should that's important is that this Cocoy Villamin guy appeared in the acknowledgement receipts for the Office of the Vice President and that of the confidential funds for the Department of Education.
So yung acknowledgement receipts, so they're problematic. And you're doing all these hearings in aid of legislation, right? We're getting also the sense that should COA not have had a bigger hand in this? It feels a little bit like their role is becoming just administrative, more ministerial than anything. Should they have accepted those acknowledgement receipts in the first place?
This should be the outcome of this hearing, that we will be able to make a new law regarding the use of the confidential fund. Now, it's not going to be as easy, although make it easy pa rin, but at the same time, make it more easier to account for where the money went. Because I'm saying it should be easy pa rin because the person disbursing it should have the leeway to use it because it's confidential in nature. But at the same time, the accountability part should also be securely established para hindi naman mahirapan yung COA to go after the persons who misuse the said fund.
There's a report that says that millions of confidential funds were taken out of Land Bank via duffel bags. What is the process? Ganun po ba talagang kailangan in cash? Kailangan ba lahat-lahat sabay-sabay? Because if you take a look at the whole process, parang it's a little bit dubious. Pangalawa, is it that easy to take out money without justification or auditing or checks and balances? What kind of checks and balances should be or could be in place? I mean, taking a look at the whole process of it, bakit ganun kabilis at ganun kadali?
From the testimony of the Land Bank representative, it was they took it out using 4 duffel bags, yung 125 million. And ang issues kasi dito is that there's only one special disbursing officer. Kung ganun kalaki yung fund po na gagamitin nyo for confidential fund, and it's going to be dispersed to different places, to different people, then it's best to have several special disbursing officers para hindi lang all lumped into one person. In fact, when we questioned Attorney Sanchez about it, where the money was placed, it's parang questionable nga din if it was placed in the office, if it was taken somewhere else. Kasi they said that they didn't have a safe that's big enough to contain that 125 million in the office. So you just won't keep 125 million laying around in the office in a drawer or something, di ba? Parang there should be a more established siguro protocols, no, on how and where to use this money. Kasi nga it's open to abuse.
Yeah. And then just very quickly, Congressman, we have about 30 seconds. Could I just have you react to Vice President Sara saying this is all political persecution?
It's never persecution. Never persecution. Never.
Congressman, hahabol ko lang din, meron na po bang nag-volunteer ng information kay Mary Grace Piatos?
Up to now, wala pa rin.
Wala pa rin, okay. We'll ask for more updates on that in the next opportunity that we have. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us on The Big Story tonight, Congressman Jonathan Keith Flores.
Well, up next, we'll take you inside the groundbreaking of the largest integrated solar and battery storage facility in the world, which is going to be hosted right here in the Philippines. The details when The Big Story returns. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News. A 200 billion peso solar farm has broken ground in Nueva Ecija with the ceremonies led by no less than President Bongbong Marcos and Meralco Chairman Manny V. Pangilinan. This facility, Marcos says, will put the Philippines on the map as a leader in renewable energy. Kari Cantor has the story.
President Bongbong Marcos led the groundbreaking of the Meralco Terra or M-Terra solar project this morning, touted to become the world's largest solar and battery storage facility. The project spans 3,500 hectares across the provinces of Nueva Ecija and Bulacan. It's a hugely impressive project by any measure. Once fully operational by 2027, the facility is set to deliver up to 3,500 megawatts of solar power to the Luzon grid thanks to 5 million solar panels. It will hold up to 4,500 megawatt hours of battery storage. The project is expected to benefit over 2 million households and generate up to 10,000 jobs.
The Terra Solar Power Project is designed to address two critical challenges of our time: the surging demand for electricity and the pressing need to shift to renewable and sustainable sources of that energy. This landmark project will put our country on the map as a leader in renewable energy.
Meralco Chairman and CEO Manny V. Pangilinan echoed this, saying the carbon emissions that the facility will cut are equivalent to pulling 3 million cars off the roads.
We will deliver 4,500 megawatt hours of clean energy, enough to power 2.4 million homes and eliminate 3.6 million tons of carbon emissions annually, the equivalent of pulling 3 million cars off our roads. The Philippines is not only keeping pace with the global energy transition, but more so we express our intention, the Philippines' intention, to lead that migration from thermal to renewables.
The Philippines has set a goal of increasing the share of renewable energy in the energy mix to 35% by 2030 and up to 50% by 2040. Though the country has ample solar, geothermal, wind, and hydro resources, these have been hard to convert to baseload energy. So the question is, will electricity prices come down once M-Terra is able to supply power to Meralco?
Palagay ko, pag-operate nito, malaramdaman na ng mga consumers.
President Marcos called on all government agencies to ensure the timely completion of the project, especially in light of the string of cyclones that the country just suffered. He also said the 200 billion peso investment in the facility demonstrates confidence in the country's economic potential.
Over the next decade, it is poised to generate nearly 23 billion pesos in financial benefits, resources that will pave the way for even greater progress.
A 13-kilometer, 500-kilovolt transmission line will connect M-Terra to the main power grid. Reporting for News 5, Kari Cator, we are One News.
Very exciting project.
Very promising.
I was there a while ago hosting that event.
I was gonna say, you know all about it because you hosted it.
Yeah, correct. So it is poised to be the largest solar farm and battery storage facility
in the world.
But kanina tinanong ko, sabi ko, largest ba talaga? Sabi, China is building a bigger farm. So, pag integrated, tayong largest. But if you take a look at Nueva Ecija, they have two resources. They have land and they have the sun. They have the heat. I think the only question I was raising to the executives a while ago was, are you going to plant crops underneath the panels?
So you could still use the land
to make
underneath.
use of it.
Sabi nila, for now, just around the panels. But parang napaisip sila kanina.
That's an idea that you suggested.
Kasi merong mga agrovoltaic crops that can be grown. Like herbs, like mushrooms.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
this is very exciting.
In the under shade.
And will definitely help us with our supply of electricity and power, especially in the Luzon grid.
Great
so
news.
more power. 1 million cars off the road to correct that 3 million figure.
Well, that's the show for us tonight.
Well, we are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.